Max, we need to bring you to the hospital and you're going to have a long rehab ahead of you. And you're like, no.
I try to be grateful for the things that I have and the relationships that I have, because I know that if I feel gratitude, it's going to bring me more good things, you know, because like the ego, I love a problem, man. Like
maybe we need to also place a little bit more care and importance on who we have kids with and the emotional maturity that it requires to make these decisions. No Nonsense Podcasts. I'm your host, Eric Uresk, here with my super producer, Max. So Solocast today, guys. Just had some things I was thinking about over the weekend. I was like, man, I'd like to have a conversation about that. I think some of this stuff is, you know, when I was a young guy going out, you know, early 20s, and I'd be going out with my boys. The whole night, 90% of the time, right, was thinking about, I want to find a girl, just not any specific type of girl, right? Obviously, you want her to be as attractive as possible.
Yeah.
And that was kind of it. And it was like and a lot of times the night was centered around just that it wasn't, I'm going to have a good time with my friends and spend, you know, build these relationships and do this, you know, anything that I would think about now that's important to me. Yeah. None of that was going on at the time. It was thinking about building an idea or like getting evidence of myself that I'm somehow worthy that a woman will sleep with me. Mm-hmm. Didn't particularly care about the woman herself. She was not like, there was nothing about her that was important other than the fact that she would sleep with me.
Sure.
Right. And then I just think about all the rest of that like, particularly that the nightclub life that I lived for a while. And maybe it's different for some people. Maybe people have a different experience with that. My experience with that whole thing was, it's kind of strange looking back now. It was so void of any actual substance.
Did you do were you a club guy?
I worked in nightclubs and so, yeah, I was definitely a club guy from like 24 till probably somewhere in my like early 30s. Was going out a lot. I was like heavily into the music as well. Like big into like the New York house music scene, deep house, techno, stuff like that. So there was that element of it too. I did really enjoy the music, but I was just thinking about how like my friends were with me and we'd have a good time and we'd laugh and we'd do stupid shit, right? Mm-hmm. But it was all kind of like background noise to the main focus of just trying to find somebody to mate with. Mm-hmm. And like, that was the end all be all. And I remember like, there would be nights, my cousin used to make fun of me about all this time. Once I decided like, I'm not getting laid tonight, I'll just leave. I'll leave.
You just went home?
I would just go home.
Yeah. See, I mean, that's interesting. I was always like, if I didn't have alcohol or drugs in my system, like I couldn't. In fact, I was just talking about this the other day. Like when I drank, like all of a sudden I was handsome and interesting and I could dance and like, you know, go talk to people and loosen up. But like, I was always so scared of women. You know what I mean? Because like the rejection was just, I wasn't willing to, you know, like, but my buddies would be like, it's a numbers game, bro. Like, you know, like
for some dudes it is, bro.
Right. You know, like if you're doing like the pickup stuff, and I'm not talking about like the, you know, I never did like the PUA community, like the super douchey, like use this dark psychology tactic.
Yeah, that shit is so cringe.
Right. It's really bad. But, you know, like, I would always like if an instant came up where like I got like I'd be like going to approach a woman and she just looked at me funny, I'd be like, oh no, man, she thinks I'm a piece of shit. You know what I mean? Like immediately. And so yeah, it's just weird. I'm like an egomaniac with an inferiority complex. Yeah. You know, and the two just like go on a seesaw. But that's just interesting that you know, that was like your main focus. And did you put a lot of effort and like were you like the guy, you're like, no, like this is my main goal tonight, and you would be talking to women and
so that's the thing. So it's funny you say that. I could never fathom being one of those guys, and I had friends like this. They would literally approach every woman in the place. Yeah. I was like, that is amazing. This guy does not give a fuck about getting rejected at all. Like for me, at that time, my ego was so fragile, so fragile. The only reason I ever got women, and I actually did pretty well, was because I worked in the clubs. I was popular.
Yeah.
Right? So by proxy, I would just kind of people would talk to me.
Sure.
People would talk to me because they needed things. People would talk to me because I was in that scene. Had it not been for that, I would have got no women.
Yeah.
Or very few.
Yeah.
Right? Like it was like it would have a lot of it would have just been dumb luck. So, but all of my energy, all of my thought at all times was like, how do I present a character that is worthy of, these women's attention?
Yes.
Everything that went on my MySpace profile at the time was like trying to
all geared towards that.
All
end goal.
geared towards projecting an image, and like because I had and I didn't realize this at the time. Like looking back now, like doing what I do for a living, I'm like, Jesus Christ, like this kid was a mess. But
yeah, it's safe to say you've done a complete 180.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But I look back, I'm like, God damn, like there was so little authenticity in so much of it. And so much of it was about not wanting to feel rejected and not wanting to feel like a reject. I think like I inherently felt like a reject. I bloomed really late with women. So I think by the time I got sober when I was 23.
Okay.
At that time,
had you had any like long-term relationships or anything? Like
never had a girlfriend.
High school, sweet. Okay.
I had a girl that I had like my neighbor that I was like desperately in love with, and I think she liked me too, but her brothers wouldn't let her date me because I was the fucking neighborhood maniac. So
that's a good one.
Yeah.
Well, you should rename the podcast that Neighborhood Maniac with Eric Uresk.
Yeah. They knew what I was about.
Right.
And at the time I was very offended, but
right. How dare you?
But so no, I had no relationships, dude. No relationships. On top of that, I don't know if I've talked about this on here, but I was shamed about sex from the time I was like 3 years old, like heavily.
Yeah.
So it was already in my psyche. There was something wrong with me when it comes to women, and nobody taught us how to like talk to girls and stuff.
No.
I was like terrified to talk to women.
Yeah,
it was
me
like
too.
it was that type of vulnerability was just not accessible to me at the time, right? So no, there was none of that. So by the time I got sober, I had maybe slept with like 3 or 4 girls.
Right.
And then I start working in nightclubs, and then it's just like they blew the seal just blew off.
Yeah.
And I was like a kid in a candy store for a good couple of years and just ran rampant and was so wanted to be seen as that guy.
Sure. Yeah. Man, sometimes I think about just
want to bring that a little closer to your face, but
it seems a little hot.
Is it? I was a little hot. Okay.
If cool. I go too close,
cool.
It might be.
Gotcha.
But yeah. Yeah. Sometimes, I think that the fantasy is better than the reality. And I've always been a monogamous guy. I've always been in relationships. But like my dad used to say, like, well, like evolutionarily, we're programmed to stick our penis in as many vaginas as possible. Like that's kind of the drive, like the drive there. But I'd be in these relationships and I was always chasing. I'd be like, oh, all right, this girl's great. And I'd get in like a relationship and I'd be like, man, like everything's really cool. But like if she was just like a little hotter or a little, maybe I could find a different woman that's like that. But then the reality is I would pursue that. And then if I found it, great. But then pretty soon I'd come up with some reason why that woman is like, well, if she was more like her, like,
right.
You know what I mean? And so it's like kind of like running on a hedonic treadmill. It's like once we,
yeah.
So it's like the fantasy of it is sometimes better than the real. Like I cannot imagine some of the, like, the Mormon guys that have like 4 or 5 wives. I don't know how they can handle that many wives at once.
If you actually had to put in like the effort with that many wives, and it wasn't just some sort of subservient,
right?
like,
Yeah, like if you were really doing it.
yeah,
I mean,
that would, yeah, that would sounds like too much. So you were monogamous. So when you were having these thoughts, you never cheated on any of these girls.
No.
You just kind of endured it until you were ready to move on.
yeah, and like when relationships would be, for all intents and purposes, over, I wouldn't be the one to break it off because I didn't want to go through the confrontation. It was comfortable for me to like stay in the relationship, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so what ended up happening is, and I realized this when I sobered up, obviously, but I was just using women to either like take care of me, provide for me financially. I just wanted to play in my band. I would do this like wounded alcoholic thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so like, oh, this is a new place to stay. Like, I know that makes me sound really shitty, but when I was like really deep in my disease, dude,
Sure.
I was, I used women to feel safe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
could see that. Yeah,
and
for sure.
even if the relationship was like done, I would, well, I better find somebody else really damn quick if I'm going to leave this one. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's just interesting. I'm probably mommy issues.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that's that's not uncommon.
Right.
Yeah, I cheated on every girl I was ever with.
Oh, really?
Every single one of them.
How come?
Well, just like you said, I could find
Just the
the same thought you were having.
yeah,
right?
but it actually came to fruition for you.
Yeah, I couldn't not.
The opportunity was presented.
It was all over, dude. I was such a dirtbag.
Yeah.
Such a dirtbag. Like the amount of like conscience that I didn't have, and I didn't feel bad about any of it.
Right.
I remember like I had this girl and I was like, listen, I'm going to cheat on you.
You said that?
Yeah.
Dang. And what did she say?
And she just kind of put up with it. Like I was pretty blatant about it. Yeah. I had a girl that I was dating, and I thought I was going to have to fake my own death to get out of this relationship, because it was like, and again, I'm 24, 25 at the time, couple years sober, like 2 years sober, emotionally just an absolute disaster.
Sure.
Right. I have no relationship skills whatsoever. None. Probably negative. And she was a bottle waitress at some of the clubs that I worked at.
Okay. What were you bouncing at these?
I was
clubs?
bouncing.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
sure.
And this is like a time where like bouncers were like glorified like superstars. Like we ran the club.
Yeah.
And it was like
For sure.
just before
you
MMA
need something
blew
to talk
up.
to the bouncer.
Yeah. So it was, it was beneficial to people to be nice to us, and so we got a lot of special treatment and sort of put on a pedestal. And yeah, there would be nights I'd meet a girl while I'm working, while my girlfriend's working at the same club.
Right.
Like go start a fight with the girl that I'm dating, so that I could leave in a storm with the girl that I met.
To justify it.
Just to justify it to her.
Yeah.
And it's just like, God.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine doing that. And it's like, that felt perfectly okay to me. Perfectly okay to me. And it's like, man, it's no wonder like relationships were so hard for me I was so selfish.
Yep.
So selfish.
Yep.
What I was able to actually contribute to a relationship was, a hard penis and like,
or maybe
and
some
fun,
some thrill.
Yeah, some thrill, some
He's
fun.
kind of a bad boy.
Yeah,
He's edgy.
Yeah, and a
adventure,
chase.
little emotional roller coaster.
Yeah. And I guess that's what these girls were getting out of it to some degree, right? They were probably dealing with their own patterns at the time,
of course.
And but it was so painful to live in that space, right? Because here's the thing: when I'm living like that, the loneliness is there all the time.
Yeah.
Right. And it was chasing these highs, and like you said, the reality was almost never as good as the fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah, almost never as good as the fantasy. I remember this distinctly. I remember before I got sober, I was out with my boy Gerard and my cousin Mike, right? My cousin Mike's been my best friend my whole life. And we're out at this club, and we're standing by the bar, and the bartender is fucking beautiful, right? And she gets up on the bar and she's dancing and we're just sitting there and I'm looking at this girl and like I'm in my alcoholism. I despise myself at this time, right? So I'm looking up at what at the time I thought like was like this goddess, and I was like, I could never get a girl like that,
Right.
And I will never get a girl like that. And I remember like I distinctly remember like thinking that and not saying that to anybody, but just feeling that and that sinking feeling in my stomach of like already feeling rejected just by looking at this woman.
Right.
And I think a lot of men can identify with that. Like looking at a woman that seems so unattainable that the feeling of rejection actually just punches you in the stomach.
Absolutely.
Right. And then I remember a few years later waking up next to her after a night out somewhere on Long Island in the summertime and thinking the exact same thing. Like first I was actually kind of like proud of myself because I remembered feeling that way that one time. And I like never told anybody about that. And it was just like, but it was also really empty.
Yeah.
Right. It was also really empty. And when I look back at it, I think what I was enacting too with a lot of the relationships is the sense of rejection I just inherently felt. Right. I think there was a part of me that was angry and also kind of dishing that back out.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mean like cycling through women, like dishing it back out that way?
Yeah.
Like I'm just going to use as many as I can.
Absolutely.
And kind of for sure.
Yeah. Like,
no, I think that's valid. And, it reminds me of like, have you seen the Seinfeld episode where George, he's like, I always go, I'm talking to women and I always tell them, what I think is going to be like interesting and fun and it just never works. And Jerry's like, well, why don't you just go tell them the God's honest truth, just straight up. And he walks up to this pretty woman in the cafe and he's like, my name's George, I'm 38, I got no job and I live with my parents. Do you want to go out sometime? And the woman's like, yeah, we could do that. And he's just like blown away that doing the counterintuitive thing worked, right? But the reason I bring that up is because it's like there's no, first of all, like when you're chasing women like that and you're pretending to be somebody, that's what I see. I always hung out with the tough guys because I never felt like a tough guy. I always felt weak. So I always hung out with these guys. I'm like, well, if I'm with these guys, then, everybody's going to leave me alone. Nobody's going to like question, anything about me. And so I would like borrow parts of other people's personalities and adopt it as myself. But when you do that, and like, let's face it, like people in the pickup community, this is just my opinion here. If you're out just chasing vagina with your life, like there's no substance in that, man.
For sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I agree with you for 100%.
And those guys, I mean, if you're reading a book on how you think you should behave around somebody else simply because you want to get your penis wet, I mean, I don't know. Like when I was like 22, 23, this is cool. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But
you don't know.
No, you don't know. Exactly. You don't
know.
And like once you've had an actual relationship, like with a woman, and you know that the woman on a vulnerable level, and you're able to be authentic, and then you get that acceptance. It's kind of like, wow, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that's actually the crux of like actually what I wanted to talk about today. Because when I was thinking about this, I was like, man, so many young men go out into the dating fields completely uneducated about women, how to deal with women physically, right, emotionally.
Right.
Where are they learning it from? Right, their parents often aren't having conversations with them, or nothing of substance. Right, if you don't have good models at home, you're just picking up unhealthy patterns.
For sure.
Right? You're a lot of times your first sexual encounters are with pornography.
Oh yeah.
Right. Which is
I think I was like 10 the first time. And like
I was younger than that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's been periods in my life where I've had real problems with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the information that you're getting. Okay. And then you're going out and you're thinking, well, girls like this and I'm not that. Right?
Yeah.
And so I need to do whatever I can to kind of be as much of that as possible.
Right.
So that I can, because I got all this testosterone running through my body and I don't know what to do with it. Right. And I think as you start to get older, if you start to pay attention to what's not working, if you start to learn from your mistakes, you start to see, as you just said, it's like, oh, it's actually just authenticity that we're all looking for. And I've seen this happen to women too. I mean, women in the club scene are the exact same. They're looking to prop themselves up to a certain, a certain image that they think will be desirable to us.
Yeah,
just the
if
same.
not more,
if not
than
more
we
so,
do.
right? And all this has happened at the same time, right? And so there's like an idea of who I need to be and who I actually feel like I am, or who I know myself to be. And if they're not in congruence with each other, then I'm chasing this sort of ideal, and it doesn't feel real and it doesn't feel authentic. And
Right.
I found it really easy to lose myself in that character.
Yeah.
That I constantly needed to be propping myself up above everybody else.
Yep.
Because I thought if you're not the top person, then you don't get picked, right? And I had this whole like gangster tough guy thing going on, and like that was my energy, right? It was like real hard, and like it scared most women.
Yeah.
It had to be like a really exceptional woman to be able to move beyond that part of it, right?
Yeah,
and,
like women like a little bit of an edgy guy, but Eric's fucking crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it completely
Right.
backfired on me to a big degree. And then I was like, oh man, I actually got to start walking that back.
Yep.
Because that went too far. Now I'm like trying to find this middle spot, and it was just what an absolute disaster, right? Imagine just having an adult in your life that's guiding you to just be yourself. That's not telling you don't need to be anything other than what you are.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't realize that like women, more than your appearance, more than if you have no body fat or not.
Right.
They emotionally remember how you made them feel.
100%.
Right?
Absolutely.
How they felt with you, if you made them laugh, et cetera, et cetera. And most of the girls that I got that, I had any dating with it were actually girls that, for whatever reason, they got a chance to see that part of me, and where I'd be like funny and just saying abruptly wild things that I just thought were funny,
Right.
and they would giggle at it, and that would actually work for me, but I did not make that connection at all.
Right.
I just went back to the character all the time.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and like the funny thing too is like I talking to my buddies, and even we're guys. I'm sure you've had experiences like this, but when you see a woman, usually like I've talked to women and they're like, yeah, like my husband now, when for the first 6 months I knew him, I couldn't stand him.
Yeah.
Like I don't
I hear that all the time.
Dudes are just like, dude, this chick's like a goddess. I'll do anything to get close.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But they're just like, yeah. And then I got to know him a little bit better.
Yeah.
So that to me says like, yes, like, okay, you don't have to be like the sexiest guy alive.
No.
And if you're not the sexiest guy alive and you're trying to be, it's going to be, they're going to be able to tell. Like, I feel like, and same thing, I think, a lot of guys, like, you can kind of tell if a woman's putting on a show or a man is putting on a show.
For sure.
Maybe like the first couple of nights, it works, but eventually, like, you can't not be yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think that eventually, like, it's gonna bleed through.
You're gonna have to. Who you are is gonna bleed through at some point, right? So you can absolutely put on the front for a little bit and put and there's a difference. Look, there's a difference between putting on a front and putting your best foot forward, right? And I think it's appropriate to put your best foot forward on when you're initially.
Yeah, it's not to say
somebody.
don't try to get better.
Yeah,
and but like the other thing about that is like you have to accept and be okay with where you are in order to put your best foot forward. Like in order to be better, like you can't resist what is right now.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So if I'm pretending that I'm somebody else, I feel like I'm just going to chase that. Like that's never going to really fulfill me because like I think on a deep level, like humans in general, like we don't want money, we don't want sex, we don't want success, like we want wholeness and peace. I want to feel accepted deep down, right? Like if you like took the root of everything, like why do I want success? Why do I want money? Why, I think like wholeness, peace, and fulfillment.
Absolutely.
And if you had that, I wouldn't need to present a different person to anybody because I would feel whole.
Absolutely.
In who I am right now.
Yeah, I've seen numerous guys drive towards success based off those wounds of not being whole and like
or comparing to others.
Or comparison, all that stuff. And again, comparison is just a I'm not whole. That guy is whole. Right. What he has is what I need to be.
Yeah.
If I had all of that, and what I find invariably, if that's the place that they're coming from, the goalpost just keeps moving.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's this endless chase to get to that place. And I see the same thing happen with women. It just looks a little different. Sometimes it's not about achieving, right? Sometimes it's just about changing who they are to fit into what the guy wants, right? So they mold themselves to fit into. So because if I had a guy, then I'd be whole. I think romantic love, like as portrayed in like cinema, is actually one of the most toxic, horrible things to get stuck in your head.
Oh yeah, well, because it's labeled like this is what it looks like.
Yeah, and like as if that's a state that if it doesn't look like that, then there's something wrong.
Yeah, then you're doing it wrong.
Right?
Exactly.
So yeah, you can have periods or moments that can feel something like that.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that that's gonna sustain itself for the end of time, that just because we have this strong feeling of love and romance, right? That just sustains itself.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how it goes, dude.
No. And in fact, I mean, unfortunately, loving somebody is not enough to develop a well-rounded relationship.
Yeah, it's absolutely not.
You know, I mean, yeah, I wish it was. I loved my ex-wife very much, but it turned out that eventually we just couldn't stand each other.
Right.
You know, which isn't to say, but things, when we talk about like life is in the gray, right?
Yeah.
So, and part of me still loves her, but not who she actually is.
Right.
It was, and you know, I don't know, I might get in trouble for saying this, but I feel like women marry men hoping they can change them, and men marry women hoping they'll always stay the same.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. If I was gonna, if I was gonna paint it with a broad stroke, for sure.
Right. Really broad stroke. But yeah, you ever hear people say like people don't change? I think that's bullshit. I think people can totally change.
Invariably.
And grow. Right.
Well, you can evolve or erode.
There you go.
Right.
That's a good way to say it.
That happens no matter what, man. Mm-hmm. Like not everybody that gets older has wisdom.
Mm-hmm. But that's good.
It's true, dude.
Yeah.
And I had a really hard time with this, and I had to kind of dial it back a bit. And I've been really thinking about this a lot lately. The adults that I had around me were so incapable in nearly every area of their life, right? Train wrecks upon train wrecks of relationships in nearly every adult that was in my world, in my sphere of influence, right?
They were trying to give you advice on relationships?
Wasn't even that. It was just like, so when I grew up, and it actually did help shape me because I didn't trust any of the adults that I had around me. Mm-hmm. It's why I had to learn everything myself. It's why I needed to deeply understand things in order to survive. What I picked up from that is I can't trust any of these fools. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to master the things that I feel like are important and gain a tremendous amount of knowledge so I don't have to rely on anybody else.
Sure.
Right. And I also really kind of look down on old people because I was basically making my experience a fact for all the world. Like, we don't fucking need old people. You know what I mean? Like they're fucking useless. What do they do? Right. And it's not a great way to look at things but that's how I looked at it. And that's that's why I looked at aging really poorly for a long time because I had no good examples of aging gracefully. I saw people get old and angry and so I'm looking around my world and I'm like, I don't want any of these people have, but there are people out there that have wisdom. There are, and that is so important. And I think like that's stuff that we need to be putting on a pedestal, right? Not just like youth and beauty.
Oh, dude. Well, yeah. Look, youth and beauty, just like everything else, by the way, is impermanent. Mm-hmm. Everything is impermanent. You're gonna feel good, and then you're gonna feel bad. Mm-hmm. Then you're gonna feel good again. Then you're gonna feel bad. You know, like nothing lasts forever. So yeah, like beauty and like I have a super neurotic relationship with age. I hate getting older. I hate like reading articles about like, well, once you get into your 40s, your testosterone levels drop and you may have chronic, like I'm just like thinking about it like, man, like what's good about this? You know what I'm saying? But when I think about it, I'm actually a lot happier now than I was like my 20s. I was a fucking nightmare. I didn't have one happy, successful, fulfilled day. Like no joy. You know what I mean? It was just all a rat race of looking at other people and being like, well, I need to have this. I need to have I got to have a business. I got to have success. I got to figure out how I can, manipulate these situations and get a lot of, it was like very goal oriented, which isn't bad, but I have simplified the way I think about things so much. And I just wake up now and it's like, I try to be grateful for the things that I have and the relationships that I have, because I know that if I feel gratitude, it's going to bring me more good things.
Yeah.
If I feel lack, the universe is just going to say, okay, yep, you're right. You lack that.
Right.
It's just going to keep delivering that, right?
Yeah, I think, well, yeah, totally. Like, I'm so much happier today than I was in my 20s, right? And it's like, I worshipped all the impermanent things when I was in my 20s.
Yeah, man.
I had a beautiful head of hair,
Yep.
8% body fat,
Yep.
and just good looking kid, and did all this cool stuff. Worked in these cool nightclubs, was around all these beautiful people, just fighting all over the country,
Right.
all over, doing cool stuff.
Yeah.
Miserable. And here's what that looks like as I start to age, right? So if I'm getting happier with age, and I am, I start to see the truth about things as time moves on, right? So I was buying into things that weren't true, that like physical beauty, like the importance that I was placing on physical beauty.
Yep.
It's a temporal thing. It's not going to be here forever, right? And I was over prioritizing these things. Image, right? Trying to be somebody that I actually wasn't. So I think in my 20s, I had an idea of a character I needed to become. In my 30s, I started to come to terms with that's not actually true. And then slowly it's been peeling away of moving back to who I more authentically am. And the more authentically I can be me, the more actually happy I am.
Totally.
Right? The less importance that I place on things outside of myself. Yesterday I woke up and I just had a reminder in the morning that I felt a little bit of a need to get busy, right? I actually slept in a little bit later yesterday than I normally would, and just felt this urge to get busy. And whenever I feel that urge to just get busy for no reason, it's a good time to go inward.
Totally.
Right? And so it's having the experience, the life experience enough to recognize those little things. I could get busy and go out into my day, and usually that busyness is there's something in me that I don't want to be with. Yeah. So I go out and engage in things so that I don't have to be with that.
Yeah.
Right. But because I'm practiced enough in understanding myself, right, and going inward, I recognize, there's something here. There's actually a little bit of a disturbance here. I don't really know what it is right now, but I'm going to sit with it before I go about my day.
Of course.
Right. So that I'm not running off of a fear, off of an anxiety, off of an insecurity, whatever it might be. And sometimes, what I actually found out, I had a lot of social engagement this weekend, not a lot of alone time. And I'm a person that does need to recharge.
Yeah.
Right. And so really all I needed to do was sit with myself, write for a bit, write for an hour or so, and just kind of what I'm experiencing, clarifying my thoughts.
It's like a self-check-in.
Yeah, just being in my own energy, right? And that's how I restore. Just being in my own energy, processing what I need to process, expressing my thoughts on paper, which is just a thing that really works well for me, right? Getting clear, looking at the thoughts, feelings, and physical sensations that I'm experiencing, right? Processing some of the downloads that I've had in my social interaction. And then I was like, all right, I'm filled up enough, I'm good, I'm charged enough that I can go into my day and be present to what's happening as opposed to just running off nervous energy.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a type of, we'll say, wisdom that comes with life experience. If I'm willing to look at it, right? If I'm willing to constantly examine my life and really get so present to see what's true in any given moment. Okay. So I got to see that it's true that I have something here. Now, I could go run off that anxious energy and go about my day. And there's nothing per se wrong with that. but that bill's going to have to get paid at some point.
Absolutely. And it's the, you know, the resistance of, and what is it? The unconscious. If you're unconscious to that feeling,
Yes.
because it's just there,
Yes.
then eventually it's going to grow
Right.
and grow and grow and
Yeah.
grow.
Yeah.
Right?
So you can't do anything about something that you're unconscious of.
Exactly.
Right.
It's just
or that
gonna-
you don't allow yourself to be conscious to.
Right. Yep.
Right.
It's just going to fester.
Yeah.
And it's going to grow, and then you're going to snap.
Now, if I was in my 20s, early 30s, I would run on that shit for weeks before I actually got to, if I ever dealt with it,
Right. Yep.
you know? So just like,
You know, something that just, I mean, it's obvious to me why this is, because, you know, I work in marketing, but the media and they want to elicit strong fear-based emotions from people,
respond
so
to
they
it.
get exactly. But like, if you meet somebody that's like truly peaceful and wise, and you bring them like a catastrophizing problem, they're usually like, oh, okay.
yeah.
And it doesn't seem like it bothers them. People are like, how can you be so cold? Like, why aren't you getting riled up about? Do you know how serious?
Yeah.
You know, so it's like the most calm, put together, whole people are perceived as like cold or uncaring because they have enough wisdom to realize like what you're freaking out about right now. Like it's not real. You may be blowing it out of proportion. Everything is fine. You know, but we don't want to hear that. You know, because like the ego. I love a problem, man. Like, you know, if there's no if there's no problem and I'm totally cool, I'll be like, where's my birth certificate? I haven't seen it in like 2 years. What if I need that for something? You know, like my brain will just grab a problem and invent one.
Well, that's what your mind does.
Exactly.
That's what your mind is designed to solve problems.
Yep. Scan for problems, scan for threats.
Well, that's why it's important to stop and go inward, right? Because if I'm constantly identified with my mind, and the mind is just telling me what to do all the time, well, then I have no choice but to go with it. Right?
Yeah. And for guys like us, that usually means into the grave.
Yeah, it's not a good, yeah, it's not a place, it's not a thing I want to follow all the time. Even just this morning, right? I just, you know, I get up, my meditation a lot of times is just watching my mind do what it does. And as I watch my mind do what it does, I recognize I do not have to buy in. I don't have to buy every story my mind is giving me. I'm not consciously deciding to have most of the thoughts that come through this thing.
No, you sure aren't.
So the mind it's really purely based off memory. Everything in your mind is memory and interpretation of memories.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
It's memories. And not even like memories exactly as they happened, and
No,
interpretations.
not at
of
all.
The memories.
Yeah. Do you have siblings?
Yeah.
So have you ever had? So I had I remember talking with my older sister about like some family vacation that we were on, and there was like a day, and I was like, man, like that day sucked, and you know, Dad was like really mad, and like I didn't like the rules,
Right.
and you know, and they said this, and like everything just was terrible that day, and my older sister was like, that's like funny, I don't remember it like that at all. You know, like her experience of what happened and my experience of what happened were totally different, even though the same things happened. But my lens on everything was so smudged and shitty, you know, that my interpretation of that was awful. And her interpretation was like, oh, that was great. I had a great time.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's just so.
And no one's wrong.
No, nobody's wrong.
Right. Now,
nobody's wrong.
Think about how often we make other people wrong for their interpretations of a situation.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And it's like, sometimes it's a hard pill to swallow. I was actually at a gathering this weekend, and I'm talking to this guy, super interesting guy. He was like a real radical leftist.
Okay.
Right? I am not.
How radical are we talking here?
Like, lives in Portland, big fan of like, you know, BLM, Antifa, and all that type of stuff, right?
All right.
So, yeah, pretty far on the left.
Yeah.
Huge into communism, thinks capitalism's the worst thing ever.
Well, I hope that person doesn't go to Starbucks or shop at any.
No, he was a nice guy, right? So I pretty much disagreed with about 90% of everything that came out of his mouth.
Sure.
And I just sat there and listened, right? Mm-hmm. And what I noticed in how he was informed as much as like, you know, he's read a lot I don't think he's read much to disagree with his beliefs,
Yeah,
right? To challenge his
right,
beliefs, but
right.
anything that he could find to support his beliefs, he had a lot of support for his
Sure.
beliefs. So I'm listening to this gentleman, again, really nice guy, and he's going on and on. And everything he was saying as if it's a fact, right? Every interpretation that he had was a fact. And, I was just saying, I think I said something to the effect of, yeah, I do, I am interested in what happens in current affairs. However, I tend to just focus on my own inward, my inward journey, so that I can, I want to be peaceful inside, right? And that seems to be the most important to me. And if I'm peaceful inside, I seem to be able to affect my world around me.
Absolutely.
And they disagreed with me. They're like, well, yeah, but it's really important to be informed, and like kind of just like went over what I said as if my experience was invalid and their experience is the only fact. And I didn't bother to argue. It didn't feel appropriate nor productive, right? So
sometimes it's a fool's errand.
yeah, so I'm just listening, right? And I knew that there was I had a sense there was not a lot of room for anything else, and it didn't feel important enough to me I didn't feel I needed to substantiate my views, right? The point of all this is when you make your experience a fact, you make no room for any other possibility.
Exactly.
Right? Not just for past events, but for future events. Because most people, if they're living unconsciously, right? If their mind is the only way that they experience the world, their past will be the way that they experience everything in the future. If your past tells you that you're worthless, you will experience a sense of worthlessness.
Absolutely.
My past,
no
as a
matter
kid,
how much money you
was
make,
that I'm ugly, unattractive, and women don't want me. It didn't matter how pretty the girl I had was. I still felt unattractive and like nobody wanted me.
Yep.
That's why I needed to upgrade from her to something different all the time.
Yep.
That's why I couldn't be faithful to anybody.
Yep.
Because I needed that constant evidence.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, I've had people offer me a compliment about something, and I'm always like, "Oh, well, I know it's nothing." And they're like, it gets tiring every time I try to say something nice about you. You reject it.
Yeah.
And like, I didn't realize like that behavior of mine could be offensive to somebody.
Sure.
They're like, I'm trying to say something nice about you. You don't say thank you. You just reject what I'm saying.
You won't receive it.
You won't receive it. And I'm like, wow. And I downplay my skills, downplay like, well, I'm okay. It's like, I won't allow anybody to compliment me, which is totally like, that's an ego thing too, right? Because
100%, dude.
Me
Yeah.
being a piece of shit is the same amount of ego as me being the shit.
Ego's ego,
right?
It's not necessarily attached to a high stance.
No, it could be
right?
I'm the worst.
I'm the worst.
Nobody's
Dude,
worse than me.
How many people do you know that they're proud of how shitty their neighborhood is?
Oh, tons.
Right? I come from the worst
Tons.
place, right?
Yeah.
So they, and I was just as guilty as anybody. I was proud of how hard my life was because it was my identity.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. It was my whole identity.
Right.
In the past, I could not have a conversation without needing to bring up my horrific past because I thought it was the only thing interesting about me.
You.
And I thought that's who I am.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's weird because now when I think about my past, it's more of from a place of like compassion for like a third person almost that, man, that person went through that, even though it was me that went through that. Or if it's going to be instructive or constructive in some way, or if I'm on somebody's podcast, obviously they're there to get my story and the interesting parts of my story. So I will tell it as, part of giving them.
You're not going to sit down at IHOP and be like, yeah, can I have the strawberry waffles? And did you know that I grew up in a really rough neighborhood?
Right. I was homeless when I was 17, by the way.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't serve a purpose in that point. But it's like that's literally all I had was my past.
Sure. And once you cling to something,
that's it. Got nothing else to talk about.
And that's why, like, with the political stuff, I mean, or like, the super far left gentleman you were talking with would have been a fool's errand to argue with that guy because his identity is wrapped up in that stance.
It's what he believes, and his identity seemed to be pretty wrapped up into it for sure. And it was like, and the thing is, he wasn't a bad guy.
No.
Right? Nice guy. So I listened, and it was actually interesting because I wasn't needing to make him wrong, even though I disagreed with him. I got to just listen to what he was saying.
Yeah.
And actually, I was interested in what he was saying.
Yeah.
And
You might be able to learn something.
Yeah.
Because you're somebody that thinks, okay, well, maybe it's valuable to you to learn somebody else's perspective.
Yeah.
Regardless if you agree with it or not, it's not a trigger for you to need to defend something.
Yeah.
Which is like an ego action. But I might have mentioned this before, but I remember when gay marriage was legalized, I had most of my friends were all for it, but I had a few close friends that didn't believe in it. And everybody was coming like, how can you be friends with that person? They don't believe this. Like, that's their fucking piece of shit. Like, how can you like that person? And I'm like, look, there's gay people in my family. I am a total supporter of it. But if I demonize somebody else for their beliefs, I mean, they're not hurting anybody. They just have a different viewpoint on this. I'm not going to throw away 20 years of friendship for a disagreement on something. Like, if I'm an adult and we're friends, we can disagree on stuff and still get along with one another.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I caught a lot of flack for that. And then, people, well, I mean, how can you be friends with somebody that doesn't support that? I mean, there's gay people in our family. And do you feel that way? I'm like, no, like, what's good about this country is that we're able to disagree with one another.
The minute I can have myself at moments really feel a certain type of way about certain types of belief systems, right? At moments. When I catch myself doing that, right? When I catch myself needing to be right, needing to make other people wrong, I'm leaving out the humanness in the other person. And man, that is such a fucking dangerous thing to do. It's how every atrocity that's ever happened has happened.
Wars start from that.
When you take away the humanity of a person, they become expendable. They become the enemy. They become a danger to your belief system, right?
So that's one of the things that I don't, fully understand about like people on the far right. This idea that, transgendered people are going to change how families work, and the men and women aren't going to have kids anymore, and all this kind of like fear mongering stuff that I hear. Like, just because trans people can get married and have rights doesn't mean that men and women aren't going to be attracted to each other. Like, they're not coming to steal your kids and teach everybody there's no like, but you know what I mean.
I get what you mean. I think with that particular issue, and I think pushing that conversation so hard, I'm not entirely sure that it's genuinely being pushed out of care, and that, obviously, I have zero issue with being the state of being trans. I could care less. I could care less about gay, straight, whatever. It's not important to me. I do think that certain family dynamics are not. They're not. I don't think family dynamics are as strong as they used to be, particularly in like mainstream culture, right? I think when you have like immigrant families are still super strong. I think but American family dynamics are I would say are by and large weak. At least that's my experience. I don't have any specific data on
what constitutes a strong family dynamic? And are you looking at it as this is how it is and that's how it's supposed to be?
Well, I'm looking at what's not there, right? So I'm looking at a lack of priority around family. And I'm just as guilty of it as anybody, right? Like, I never had any prioritization on family. Community and a feeling of closeness, I think, is really important.
Sure.
Right? I think families are very much spread out now. I think parents are being left to parent kids on their own, and I don't think it's natural.
Okay.
I think it's very, very stressful. I think that...
Yeah, in general, children need both parents.
Not just both parents, grandparents, and uncles. Right. A supporting cast.
It takes a village.
I really believe it takes a village, and I don't think that happens.
Yeah. When my and to speak to that, when my daughter was born, my mom came out here from Minnesota and lived with us for like a year and a half. Not only did that make the quality of my marriage and my life much better during that time, but my daughter developed this super tight bond with my mom. and they're just like, grandma, it's like her favorite person. And she, my mom would like read books to my daughter when she was like 0 years old, and now like, she's super smart and she feels loved. Like the more adults in a child's life that make them feel loved, the better.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I was actually just thinking about it. I think I can crystallize how I feel about it in this way. I think there's a section of, we'll say, leftist thinking, it's usually pretty far left, that wants to tear down everything traditional, period.
Sure.
Right? And there's the right wants things to be like the 1950s.
They want to save it.
They want to save,
Yep.
but they want to save like a version that also didn't quite work all the way.
Of course.
Right? So I think as always, right, I think there's room in the middle for, we could change some things about some of the ways that we look at traditional families,
Sure.
while not demonizing men, right? While recognizing the importance of men and women sustaining marriage while raising a children, that's actually important. That throwing marriage away is not something that should be done frivolously. That marriage is actually a sacred thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, does the government need to be involved in it? That's a whole nother conversation. Right.
Sure.
But the act of of two people, if you conceive a child, that's a serious thing. Maybe we need to also place a little bit more care and importance on who we have kids with and who we have sex with.
Sure.
Right. And the emotional maturity that it requires to make these decisions and get involved in a dynamic like parenthood. Right.
Yeah.
So
that's valid.
Instead of just treating it like a thing that you do on Saturday night with somebody that you don't care about.
Yep.
Right. And dude, trust me, there was a time in my life I would not want to, like, this conversation would seem silly to me.
Yeah.
Like, but I realize what happens when people are not equipped emotionally to raise a child, when they're not equipped to emotionally co-pilot a relationship together and have a child.
Yeah. I mean, like, I get what you're saying, but I don't really think anybody's ready to have a child. You either do it or you don't. Once you have it, you learn a lot.
Sure.
You know what I mean? That's been my experience. And however, I chose the wrong person to marry because I was very compulsive. And this whole conversation plays into this because she was super attractive. Right off the bat, I was like, wow, like she's like a 10. What do I got to do, man? What do I got to do, And I like played into it. And then even though like there were some red flags that things might not work out, and I was just like, nope, I'm already pot committed. We're getting married. Right. It's a done deal. And then we had a kid. And then, 3 years into the marriage, we're both miserable.
Right.
Now, if I would have put more thought and care at first into that, and really if I would have been more self-developed, and like, okay, who am I really? What type of woman is the best partner for me? This kind of stuff, that, the situation probably would have been different. So I believe that, that relationship happened. The universe, God, call it what you will, put me in that position simply so I could have my daughter, which has obviously been phenomenal. But to your point, yes, I mean, I don't think we're teaching enough about that kind of emotional intelligence, right?
That's it, man. That's literally all I'm here for, right? Is like, let's just be really honest about what we're doing. Let's really be honest.
Yep.
Bro, I don't give a fuck if you're trans or not. I literally do not. You may as well tell me that you're a straight guy. Like, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, right? That's pretty much normal, especially where I live. At least for me, it's like it's more normal than it's not.
We hang out, at Cava and Hillcrest. I mean, there's all sorts of people.
Yeah, I could walk out my building and I'm. God only knows what ratio of people that I'm gonna run into on my way to the coffee shop, right? And again, I think it's great. I love it. Let's just get real honest with ourselves.
Yeah.
The more that we have the conversation of honest reflection, right? The fact that you can honestly reflect on why you got involved in that relationship, right? So that you can do better moving forward, and that maybe you can also have that conversation with your daughter when she comes of age to be out there dating, and you can help her maybe not have that conversation be so awkward to have, or walk her through the awkwardness that most parents aren't willing to do, right? Or that many parents haven't been willing to do. Then maybe you can save her from some of the mistakes that that you made.
Totally.
Right.
And that's why, even though she's 7, I remind her frequently, like, if you tell me the truth, I'm not saying that I won't be disappointed, but if you're always truthful, I'm not going to get mad at you. I will accept it. I love you no matter. Like, I want her to be able to, no matter, like, the worst shit in the world happens, or she does something, makes a big mistake, I want her to feel comfortable telling me about it.
So important.
Comfortable telling me about it.
So important.
Right? And then, because she's looking at me, like, when she starts dating, you know, like, this guy, I'm looking for a guy that reminds me of my dad. Like, I'm, you know, a father is going to model how to treat women. Yeah. Like, she's watching that with me and Casey.
Absolutely.
She's watching how I treat her, how I treat other people.
I think that's really important, man.
Right? Yeah, me too. I think it's super really important.
I think that's really important. So that's the stuff I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Now, imagine you're not in the picture.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, a single mom is out there doing the best she can. She can't do that part of the modeling.
No, she cannot. You know, can't teach a young man or a boy how to be a man, and can't model how a man is supposed to treat women to a daughter.
Yeah. So
true.
I do
and
think
vice versa for men.
And look, we're not all going to nail it. We're not all going to get, we're going to make mistakes. 100%, right? I think it's just acknowledge the mistake, right? Yeah. Honestly reflect upon it.
Totally.
Honestly,
we're fallible.
Take ownership of your hurt. Take ownership of your past mistakes. Take ownership of your mistakes that you've made in relationships and grow from them, right? It's, if you're a parent, it's your fucking job to heal. It's your job to take care of that shit so that you do pass as little of it off onto your kid as possible. I think that's really important. Man.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. Instead of just blaming the guy. Well, yeah, the guy or the girl, right? Oh, that bitch, you know, she did me dirty and stuff. Well, bro, you got in a relationship with her and decided to have a kid with her, or sweetheart, I'm sorry that this guy did you dirty, but what made you think it was a good idea to have a kid with this guy?
Yeah. Well, that's, I mean, you know, that's the lack of accountability is rampant.
Yeah.
But also, you know, when you have all people, different schools of thought, people on the left, people on the right, like, the disagreement isn't, that's good. Like, you know, diversity is a good thing. You got to have it, right? And sometimes you need friction. Where we go wrong is, like, just like you said, hey, I'm this way. I believe this. This is what I want for my life. Okay, cool. That's fine. You're right. Hey, I'm this way. I think this. This is what I want for my life. Okay, cool. You're right.
Yeah.
That's where we go wrong, where it's like, you're not doing it how I do it. And so that means you're bad, you're wrong, you know. So, like, in my viewpoint, so long as you're not harming somebody else or doing something, you know, that is, like, ethically or morally wrong, you could say, go ahead and live your life however you want. I'm not going to tell you how to do it.
That's my
But don't tell me you're not, if you don't do this, then you're not right about that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And, you know, I generally agree with that completely. I think where people will challenge you is they will take certain issues and say that, well, if you don't look at this, then violence can happen to me, right? Or that certain types of communication are violent, or they'll bring up the abortion issue, right? And I get it, like, all these things, they're valid issues, right? I think I'm so willing to look at all parts of that, and it's tough because we do live in at least in America, right? You kind of have these two opposing ideologies. And I think most people live somewhere in the center, right? But your governance is these two opposing.
Yeah.
And every 4 years, there's a group of people that are going to feel subjected to some rule that endangers their way of life, or so they feel, or so they tell themselves.
Threatens their identity.
I don't know how true that actually is, and then it's going to flip flop back and forth, right? And,
the pendulum swings.
Yeah, I find it so much easier to just take responsibility for my own life, right? And because I take responsibility for my own life, it's not that important to me who's in what office, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I save a little bit of money because of it. Sometimes I pay a little bit more.
Right.
And, you know, I obviously rather pay less if I can. I despise giving paying for wars overseas and
Yeah,
stuff like
no,
that.
I just don't like the government.
Yeah,
really
I'm not big on. Yeah, exactly.
I'm just not.
I do find, and how people will argue that. Well, isn't that privileged of you as a straight white male?
Sure, of course. And hey, guess what? Yeah, like we are straight white guys, and there's some opportunity that comes along with that. But I mean, we take accountability for our shit, right? Like anybody can take accountability for their shit.
I have friends of every race, sexual orientation, what have you, that are doing things with their lives that are great.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's bumps in the road for everybody. I mean, I don't come from a great beginning, and like everything that I have, I've absolutely earned. So I think that conversation's silly.
I'd say though, I mean, the system I think being white does come with a privilege. I think that, I've never had to go out somewhere and be worried that somebody was going to do me harm simply because of the color of my skin.
Have you ever? Well, sure, until you go to the hood.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know, man. I don't think that white people experience
they don't,
quote unquote racism like
no,
minorities do.
No, for sure. I don't think so either. I don't think so either.
Like this whole I had like people, like reverse racism and like, no, I was called names. It's like it's just the system is set up for white people, in my opinion.
I don't think the system is set up for white people. I think how certain people carry it out can be racist. I don't think because there's no law that you can point out to that's different for different people. How it gets carried out.
No, there's no law, but there's blanketed prejudice and racism that's rampant through this whole entire country.
Sure, within individuals.
Well, within systems as well.
Can you point to one that
systems? I mean, I think educational systems. I'd say business systems. I
think it's more class than anything.
But I mean, the wealthy happen to be white and happen to be high class.
I think actually the two wealthiest nationalities or racial identities right now are Asian Americans and Indian Americans.
Okay.
And then white falls in third.
Okay.
I do think it's class. I think it's class more than anything. And I think disproportionately that does affect minority communities like Black and Hispanic communities.
If you go to minority communities, there's more liquor stores, more fast food, more gun shops.
I think it's a class thing. So
but it's been set up that way intentionally.
That I don't know, but it's there. So whether it's intentional or not, it's there, right? Yeah. So that I think we need to pay attention to. I'd love to see more money thrown into schools and into poor neighborhoods and stuff like that. I'm all for that.
Right.
I think.
But check this out real quick. You'll be interested in this. So there was a study done years ago, and I learned about this when I was in school for psychology, and it showed that judges sentence people with Afrocentric features to harsher criminal sentences than Eurocentric features.
I could see that.
And it doesn't matter how your skin, it's like a wider nose, bigger lips, things like that. So that in itself shows that if you look more Afrocentric, you're getting harsher criminal sentences. So that to me says that there's something within the system.
But how do we point to that, right? So I think that's horrible.
We point to it through the study and the data that was done. Now, I can't remember the size of it and how statistically relevant it was. So, I couldn't quote you on the numbers, but that's definitely interesting that if you have Afrocentric features.
No, and I don't have any problem with that argument or that study.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I want to point out the instances that happen as opposed to these sort of like blanket ideas. Right?
Sure.
Let's point out because there's nothing I can do with that.
Yeah.
There's no law to change.
Well, no, there's no law to change, but what you can do is you can adopt some awareness around it.
Okay, and then
keep that in mind as you live your life.
And then where do we go with that?
Well, I'm not going to march to City Hall over it, but
So that's what I mean. So it's like,
but here's the thing: is if there's a systematic problem, and I can have awareness over it, and then spread the awareness, and several people have awareness over it, maybe eventually something will change.
that's possible. I'm more of the belief of let me just empower the people around me,
Yeah.
whatever color they are, to the best of my ability. That even though these circumstances exist,
Yeah, for sure.
the circumstances have nothing to do with whether you can rise or not.
Yeah. Okay.
If circumstance,
Yeah. I mean, if you're, I don't know, man. That's a tough one for me. Yes, anybody can rise, but if depending on where you grow up, how much
That's a
money your family,
circumstance.
sure, but circumstances do have an impact.
they have
You can still rise, but they do have
they have
an
an
impact.
They're not the determining factor, right? So
Not
if
necessarily,
you
no.
get somebody to buy into defeat because of their circumstances, they don't get started.
Sure, and I completely agree with that.
That I don't.
I
wanna
just
disempower
don't
people.
believe in the bootstrap
Me
mentality.
neither.
Everybody
Me neither.
pull up your bootstraps.
Me neither.
You know,
and that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Listen to what I'm saying. I want to empower people
Mm-hmm.
to not let their circumstances be the determining factor.
Yeah, of course.
Right. That's
Yeah.
my personal mission.
Yes.
Right. I'm not saying that if you're ignorant to that,
Yeah.
if you don't know that, then yeah, your circumstances are going to beat the shit out of you unless you're some sort of outlier that just fucking figures it out
Yeah,
and cracks the
yeah,
code, right?
yeah.
What I'm saying is I love talking to people
Yeah.
and helping them get awake to the fact that their circumstances, once you see that circumstances are actually bullshit,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, if you're not awake to that, the circumstances are your world. They are your experience. Once you become awake to it, then you're responsible.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
Now, there's a difference there,
Yeah.
right? You're armed with that information. You're armed with that experience, right? So I think it's important to arm more people with that experience.
And I would agree.
Like, here's the thing. I think so much of these communities, I don't want them to feel disempowered. I don't
Sure.
want them to be disempowered.
Right.
And I think like that's the best thing I can do for anybody
Absolutely.
is to empower them.
Yeah,
Right?
for sure.
So
but I think that has to come from a collective place, not just individuals.
I don't know how you do that.
I think if somebody did and they were doing it, the world would be a better place.
That's what I'm saying though, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
so because
So
I don't
maybe I'm an idealist.
yeah, I don't have a way to collectively do that right now.
Sure.
right? I think this podcast is one of those
Yeah.
those like having these conversations.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So there's this thing
Spreading
I talk,
awareness
there's this
about
thing
it.
I talk about often, right? I got it from this guy Coleman Hughes, and he got it somewhere else, but it's called the parable of the pedestrian. Mm-hmm. Okay. I've spoken about this publicly a bunch, but I think this encapsulates my belief more than anything. So imagine you're standing on a sidewalk
Mm-hmm.
legally, right? You're not breaking any laws.
Mm-hmm.
Drunk driver comes down the road,
Mm-hmm.
pulls onto the curb, hits you, pulls off, takes off. No camera saw a thing. The guy's gone. You're laying on the curb, hurt badly.
Yep.
Okay. It is not your fault.
No, it is my fault.
Why?
Well, I mean,
Hold on. Let me finish. Right? So you did nothing to bring this upon yourself other than be on a sidewalk.
right.
Right? You weren't breaking any laws, didn't do anything to deserve this.
Sure.
Okay? Guy's gone. We're never going to catch him.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're laying there and they're like, hey, Max, we need to bring you to the hospital and you're going to have a long rehab ahead of you. And you're like, no, I want the guy that hurt me to come back, pick me up, take me to the hospital. He needs to pay for my rehab.
Yeah.
And I need to go and do the rehab for me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Or, so that's what you're insisting upon,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or you can say, man, this fucking sucks,
Mm-hmm.
but the guy's not coming back.
Right.
Right? My parents can't reparent me. My people that
Yep.
hurt me, there's nothing they can do for me right
Right.
now. Even if they said they're sorry,
Mm-hmm.
I still got to do the work that's
Of
left ahead of me.
course. Yeah.
What do you do?
Right. Well, I mean, so what do you mean? What you're asking me? What do you mean?
Well, so which way does the person go is often gonna define how they experience their
Right.
life.
Yeah. But that's taking accountability for what is,
Yes.
regardless of whatever happens.
Yeah, and that's how I look at it, right? It's
taking
not that bad
accountability of
shit
what
doesn't
is.
happen. I don't want to say bad shit doesn't happen.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
I just don't want to get lost in it.
Of course not.
Because it like it literally does no good.
Yeah.
I actually don't think it does any good. I actually think it keeps people there. And you got to understand, man, people will look at me sometimes like I'm a monster for thinking that. Like, I'll hear you out if I'm dealing with a person because they need to express that stuff and vent it. But if the person is to ever actually begin healing, at some point, they're going to need to be willing to move beyond that.
Sure.
They're going to need to be willing to, this sucked, I'm fucking angry, but I can't stay here.
Right.
Right? And if we just stay there, then no healing happens.
Yeah.
Right? So I really hope if anybody like listened to this conversation and you got stuck at the part where I'm challenging you on some of these ideas, please like listen to the whole conversation, right? Because it's not about me denying anybody's experience.
Right.
I'm not trying to deny anybody's experience.
Yeah, no, of course not.
I understand these things hurt. I understand that they happen.
Right.
Focusing just on that, you're leaving out the part where you get to turn that into some sort of like redemption or like the hero part of the story.
Right.
And I don't want people to miss out on the hero part of the story.
Of course not. No. And like self-accountability, no matter what situation you're in life, is very important.
No matter what. So that's why for me, yeah, these things happen. They exist, right? But they exist in this place where there's like, if you just look at that, there's really not a whole lot you can do about it, at least as far as I'm concerned.
Sure.
Right? So life by life, case by case, it's like, okay, let's deal with what hurt you about that. Let's deal with your anger, right? And like, yeah, you get to process that. You get to process the hurt. And then, okay, do you want to move beyond that? Do you want to go to a place where this no longer owns you or controls your life?
Yep.
That's what I'm talking about.
I mean, I get it. Yeah. Very true. So the question is, how do we get more guys like you with your message to get out to a wide audience of people?
Well, first, you listen to this podcast.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was getting at.
No, but I think, so, I don't have that all figured out, man. I think that message is really important to me.
Yeah. But think about it. If everybody had the attitude, stuff is going on in life. It may not be right, but I'm still going to take accountability for my situation.
How I show
Try to make the best of it. If everybody collectively did that, a lot of problems would minimize greatly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But we just have this tendency to like, it's because this person did that.
Yeah.
It's because that person
and
did
it's
that.
super easy to get stuck there, right? And
yeah.
And it's, look what happens.
Yeah.
Look at what that does to the majority of people. It just leaves them blaming
Victimizes.
It victimizes and they just do this.
Yep.
Bro, it's not effective. It is not effective to do that.
Right.
Even
regardless of what the other person did, doesn't matter who
doesn't
did
fucking
what.
matter. Even if they
not,
say,
it's
yeah,
not
you know
effective.
what, you're right. We're fucking wrong. Okay, where do you go from there?
Exactly.
Where do you go from there?
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So you preach the act, like you have to take a positive action if you want things to be more positive, no matter what.
Yeah, there's a process, right? So if you've got pain in your life, if you've got pain because of racism in your life, you had some real racism happen in your life.
Right.
Okay. I'm of the opinion that even getting justice around the racism is not going to do anything to address the pain, right? So it's each of our job to deal with our pain, even pain that we didn't ask for.
Sure.
Even pain that was put upon us by somebody else. Even if you've truly been a victim, your pain is your pain.
Yeah.
You've got to process that in order to move forward.
Yep. Yeah,
doesn't matter.
You can't resist what is.
You could have been abused. You could have been left for dead. Like there's lots of sexual assault, any of that stuff. Yeah, we can fight that all day long, right? And yeah, it's wrong. And if I could have helped you have that not happen, I 100% would have.
Of course,
right?
Yeah, but you're about what can you realistically take accountability for and take control of to make your life better? What can you do?
Yeah, what can you do to become the most powerful version of you so that you can be out here creating what you want in the world,
right?
Not being stuck in what happened to you.
Right. And by the way, if somebody, I've said similar things and people are like, well, that's really selfish. And what I've said is, yes, but here's the thing. If I am operating at a low vibration and my brain is just shit, how am I going to be helpful to anybody? I'm not going to be helpful to anybody. If I am operating at my best because I take accountability, you know, I have some emotional intelligence, I'm mindful of my relationships, I'm trying to serve other people, then I'm going to be much more effective.
Absolutely.
But if I'm shitty and not happy and I'm, you know, pissed off and resentful
Stuck
and
in the past
and victimized and stuff, yeah, it's stuck. Exactly. Then I'm not going to be helpful to anybody.
Yeah,
can't help anybody.
There's no life that's productive when you're stuck in what happened to you.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so, yeah, man, I'll have that hard conversation, you know, and you know, I may have some black friends, trans friends, gay friends listening to this, and they might get to that part of the conversation and be like, oh my God, what an asshole. It's like, no, let's go a little bit further.
Sure.
Yeah. I just don't want to get stuck in that because I don't think it's helpful.
Yeah.
And like, I love people that much that I'll be that bad guy in their life. That's like, okay, I'll hear what happened to you. But what are we going to do? You know?
Yeah.
I'm willing to go through that with people at times. And I do it every day. Every day I've got to, you know, sit with people through some of the really tough things that happen in their life. And I listen to them and I don't argue with them and I don't tell them you shouldn't feel that way. That's not part of the process,
No,
right?
yeah.
It's like, okay, let's internalize what happened here, right? And then at a certain point when the safety gets created, we can move beyond it, or we can move into what you actually want to create.
Sure.
Where do you want to live from?
Yeah. Or what I always ask people, like, what kind of life do you want to have?
That's it. Super simple. So I think we'll close it right there. And I appreciate your, you know, the points that you bring forth in these conversations, and you know, the way that, you know, not backing down off them, and just kind of, I see it like this, and some of the challenges that you present, because it does make me present my idea a little bit more clearly, right? So it's easy for me to say, like I don't think that the laws themselves are inherently racist. I do think there are people that carry them out in a racist manner, right? And racist stuff does happen, and I want to call out racist stuff when it does happen for sure. And to the people that are being victims of that have been victimized from racism, right? I don't want that to be the reason that you stop creating the life that you want to live.
Yes, right. And that, I think that message right there is, I mean, that's important for anybody.
Yeah.
Anywhere.
If you've been a victim of sexual abuse, I don't want that to be the reason that you can't live the life that you want to live. If you had a horrific childhood, I don't want that to be the reason that you can't live the life.
Yeah. And people's pain is subjective too.
Absolutely.
Like what, you know, when it comes back to what you were saying at the beginning of the beginning of the podcast, how we like to I went through this terrible experience. Well, mine was even worse.
They start comparing. Right. Yeah, I hate that shit.
Like being yelled at by a parent could be as harmful to somebody's emotional makeup as, you know, being beat as a child.
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying that being beat obviously is worse than being yelled at. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, like, you know, when we do this, well, you know, your pain is not as bad as my pain. You know, it's subjective. Yeah. So you're saying,
the oppression
okay,
Olympics,
fine, somebody yelled at you. That's a big problem for you. I'm hearing you. How do we move past it? Okay, you had this experience. Maybe it was way more traumatizing you would think, but you know, it's no matter where you're at, no matter what the experience was, how do you take accountability for it and move past it to build the life you want? Yeah,
absolutely, right? So it's like, I don't even think that beating somebody is necessarily worse than like being yelled at. Like sometimes being yelled at turns so emotionally abusive that it really messes up the person's ability to have relationships moving forward. So instead of comparing the two, right. What happened to you? How did you internalize that? What did you decide that means about you? And how is that affecting your life today?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Are you happy? And so from how it's affecting your life today, where would you like to go from here? And then we do it like that. I think it's the comparison and the values that we place upon these things that get us fucked up in the first place. Right. And it's a real easy way to actually dehumanize a person's experience, right? So I don't ever want to take away that the person's experience happened, or that it wasn't really painful for them, or they didn't experience something very challenging from it.
Right.
However, I love you enough, whoever you are, to go all the way through to the end with you of, okay, well, what are we going to do about that? All right. So we'll close that there. Thank you guys for listening. I don't have too much to say. I'm actually just kind of taking all that in because it did make me think about some things and just like how easy it is for as people are having these conversations. And I think, you're hearing these political conversations and you're hearing the opposite side of your beliefs, and it can feel like your experience is being attacked, right? And that might be happening for two groups of people. And I think like, man, that sucks when you feel like your experience is being attacked and that your worldview is not important to a sect of people. And I think there's so much room to meet in the middle for understanding.
Agreed.
So we'll see you guys next time.